you with the Bulls, you get hurt, y'all '1 in the East at the time. What do you think y'all season would have been like had you not been hurt? How you feel about the team? Y'all have a squad. Like, how'd you feel about it?
It's gonna be a big what if. I mean, for me, I feel bad just for the GMs, just because I feel like they made the perfect team around me, and I felt like I was involved in. That was the most I've ever been involved in an organization, and I finally got the perfect team. You know, that I felt like to fit my game and play my way and really just do what I wanted to.
As Bulls fans, we've experienced enough pain throughout our fandom, whether you've been following the team since the early days before Michael Jordan or even just last season. And while we already knew what Lonzo Ball said on Trae Young's From the Point podcast was true and something I think we all deep down wonder what could have been, it makes it all the more painful when you hear it from Lonzo himself when he talks about it, and that this was the most he's ever been involved in an organization, and that he finally got the perfect team to fit his style of play. Like, after all these years of Lonzo being in the NBA, getting a lot of criticism early on from being so overly hyped by his dad and this potential star for the LA Lakers, when in reality he had a fairly underwhelming rookie season, and every year thereafter, every roster that he was on just didn't fit with his style of basketball that he wanted to play. And knowing that he found that in Chicago, that he found his place in Chicago, almost turning this team into a well-oiled machine despite being a brand new constructed roster in the summer of 2021. All of it was washed away when Lonzo Ball played his last game on January 14, 2022, and is yet to return to the court since then, when the Bulls were the #1 seed in the East and poised to make some noise in the future with this team that they had assembled. But we obviously know now that that wasn't meant to be, and it's very possible it may never be, with the doubts of Lonzo being able to return to the game of basketball in his career, or at least returning to the same player he once was after missing nearly 2.5 years from NBA action by the time he is set to return. But as sad and upsetting as it is for Bulls fans, and of course Lonzo himself, and realizing what could have been based on what we saw at the start of the 21-22 season, I do think that it serves as a reminder of just how much the injury of Lonzo Ball derailed everything this front office was trying to build, and it's what we'll be talking about in this video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I feel it's become commonplace among Bulls fans to heavily criticize the new front office of Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley, myself included. I've been very critical of some of the decisions they've made in recent years on the channel, or sometimes the indecision, I should say, with standing pat at the trade deadline and minimal transactions being made in the offseason. And honestly, these are all justified critiques. I mean, when a team doesn't perform, they fall below expectations, you better believe the fan base is going to let you hear about it. But while we've been very hard on the front office for the better part of the last year and a half or so, I do want to come to their defense here in this video, which is odd. I know most won't agree with it, but just like everything, there are always two sides to an argument or even a given perspective, and sometimes we get so narrowly focused on one side of the argument that we let our recency bias forget the other side of the coin. Now, I'm sure you all remember the start of the 21-22 season. The Bulls were one of the best teams in the NBA. They had the #1 defense in the league, and by a wide margin, which a lot of that was anchored from Lonzo Ball and his point of attack defense. They were incredible at turning defense into offense, playing great in transition, excellent pace, great ball movement, and also an efficient team on offense on the backs of DeMar DeRozan and Zach Lavine. And then obviously Lonzo Ball having his best three-point shooting season yet. The Bulls floated around the #1 spot in the East throughout December and January, and even all the way leading up to the All-Star break. Yes, even after Lonzo Ball went down. The Bulls were considered contenders. You might laugh at that, but they really were. Do you remember when Rick Carlisle said that they were going to be waiving Tristan Thompson and he was going to sign with a contender in their division that started with a C? Yeah, he was talking about Chicago. Of course, signing Thompson was a mistake, even though it seemed like a good idea at the time when the Bulls needed some depth at the 5 behind Vucevic. But the point being, the Bulls were being viewed as legitimate title contenders. Now, deep down, I think some of us knew this team probably wasn't as good as their record would indicate. They were great at beating the teams that they were supposed to beat, but for the life of them, they could not beat the other elite teams in the NBA, even with Lonzo. And as good as I knew the Bulls were, and was excited to see my team finally be good again, I knew this still wasn't a title team. Not yet, anyway. But you could see a pathway for them to get there with the roster construction they had. The fact that they had Alex Caruso, Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan all locked up for the foreseeable future, and also the plan to re-sign Zach, and then leaving a little room left to build on the margins, you could see the vision. You could see the path for this team on their way up and being a contending team. Maybe not for that immediate season, but in the near future. But of course, that all came crashing down when it was announced that Lonzo wasn't going to be returning that season, wasn't making progress in the offseason, and obviously wasn't going to start in the 2022-23 season. And I don't need to explain the rest, but hasn't played since and won't play this season as well. And the reason I bring all this up is because, look, I get the frustration towards the front office, the coaching staff, even towards some of the players. I'm frustrated too. It's far more frustrating to see a team with talent do poorly and fall below expectations than watching a team that is rebuilding and expected to lose. And when a team that has the roster the Bulls have, and they finish below 500 and they find themselves in the position where they're kind of stuck from a cap perspective, from a tax perspective, and how there really aren't a lot of ways out to improving this team outside of just blowing everything up. Yes, that is on the front office, and they should be held accountable for that. But they would have never found themselves in this position had Lonzo Ball never gotten injured, a circumstance that could have never been foreseen, especially to the magnitude that it's become. Like, we knew Lonzo was injury prone. He had struggled staying healthy on the court before joining the Bulls, but never would they have expected that after playing just a half season with the team that his career would potentially be over. No one would have expected that, even for someone like myself who was skeptical of the idea of bringing in Lonzo because of his injury history. Not a chance that I think this guy's career would end at the age of 24. Even Rose's injuries weren't that bad that kept him off the court for that long. And so without Lonzo Ball's injury, maybe the Bulls would have eventually cooled off a bit in that season. And you wouldn't have seen the insane game-winning streaks like they had, and they probably wouldn't have finished the year with the #1 seed in the East. But they would have been a damn good team. A team that would have been good enough to make some noise in the playoffs and garnered interest on the free agency market with the way they were playing to bolster the roster up further and eventually get this team to being a true championship contender. And we would all still be praising AKME and the excellent job that they've done in assembling this team, because we were all doing it. Like, we may not want to admit that, but we were saying all of this about the front office 2 years ago, but it's true. In AK we trust, saying he was a basketball mastermind. It was there. Now, should AK and Mark Eversley had a backup plan to all this, a plan B for something like this if it were to happen? Yeah, they should have. And have they handled things well since Lonzo's injury? No, they haven't. And to make it worse, they don't take much accountability when talking to the media. If anything, they sometimes make it seem like we're all dumb when we clearly can see this team isn't working, and yet they try to cling on to it and think of every excuse in the book for why they're running things back. Yeah, that makes fans lose their confidence and trust in this front office to fix it. Because a great front office will pivot and adjust and do what they have to do to ensure their team remains competitive no matter the circumstances being thrown at them. So I'm not absolving the management for all of the questionable moves that they've made and saying, well, it's not their fault Lonzo got injured, and had Lonzo not ever gotten injured, this team would have been perfect. No. But when I hear people starting to compare AKME to Garpax, or in some cases saying that these guys are worse than Garpax, slow your roll. They actually put together a great team in 2021 with a solid plan in place to start competing now and bringing the Bulls back to relevancy again. The Bulls were on their way. They really were. Still had some work to do to truly make the roster elite, but they were on their way. And everything was derailed by Lonzo Ball's injury. Just an unfortunate circumstance of events. I would love to hear what you guys think, though. I'll leave a link to the full podcast of Trae Young and Lonzo Ball if you're interested. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.